15 black actors who died after their spouse passed away. Some of the most beloved black celebrities in history spent their final years carrying unimaginable heartbreak behind closed doors. The cameras captured their fame. The applause celebrated their talent. But very few people saw the loneliness that followed after the loss of the person they loved most. From legendary voices to Hollywood pioneers, these stars smiled in public while privately battling grief, regret, and emotional scars that never fully healed. Some never recovered after losing a spouse. Others watched their marriages collapse under the pressure of fame, addiction, and betrayal. But how much of their pain was hidden from the world, and how much was quietly ignored? Tonight, Black Celebrity Secrets uncovers the emotional stories behind the spotlight. Before we begin, subscribe to Black Celebrity Secrets, like this video, and tell us in the comments, which celebrity's story shocked you the most? Ruby Dee. Ruby Dee was more than a celebrated actress. She was a voice of dignity, resilience, and enduring devotion, whose life stretched across nearly a century of American history. Born in Cleveland, Ohio in 1922 and raised in Harlem, Ruby became one of the most respected black performers of her generation, earning acclaim on stage, television, and film. Yet behind the awards, standing ovations, and historic achievements stood a love story that shaped the very center of her world. In 1948, Ruby married actor and activist Ossie Davis after the two met while performing in the play Jeb. What began as artistic chemistry evolved into one of Hollywood's most admired marriages. For more than 5 decades, they worked side by side through segregation, political unrest, and the exhausting pressures of fame. Together, they marched for civil rights, supported Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and became cultural symbols of loyalty and purpose. Their partnership was so admired that many viewed them as inseparable, two souls moving through history in perfect rhythm. But on February 4, 2005, that rhythm abruptly stopped. Ossie Davis died from a heart attack at the age of 87 while staying in a Miami hotel room during a film production. The news devastated Ruby. Friends close to her later described a profound stillness that settled over her life after his passing. Publicly, she remained graceful and composed, but the absence of the man she had shared 56 years with changed her deeply. Although Ruby continued making appearances and accepted praise for her extraordinary career, those closest to her noticed that she rarely spoke about the future anymore. Much of her later life became centered on preserving the memory of the man who had walked beside her through every triumph and hardship. In interviews, she often reflected on love, aging, and loss with heartbreaking honesty, describing marriage not as perfection, but as commitment strengthened through struggle. In June 2014, Ruby Dee passed away at the age of 91 in New Rochelle, New York. By then, nearly 9 years had passed since Ossie's death, yet many believed she never truly recovered from losing him. Her remarkable legacy lives on through films like A Raisin in the Sun and Do the Right Thing. But beyond the spotlight, Ruby Dee's story remains one of profound companionship. A woman who spent decades building a life with the love of her life, only to spend her final years carrying the quiet ache left behind after he was gone. Coretta Scott King. Coretta Scott King carried extraordinary strength long after tragedy altered the course of her life forever. While history often remembers her as the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., she was far more than a grieving spouse standing in the shadow of a movement. She was an accomplished activist, author, singer, strategist, and one of the most influential women of the civil rights era. Yet despite her courage in public, the loss she endured in private never completely faded. Born in rural Alabama in 1927, Coretta Scott grew up in the deeply segregated South, where racial violence and discrimination were constant realities. Intelligent and artistically gifted, she studied music at Antioch College before continuing her education at the New England Conservatory in Boston. It was there she met Martin Luther King Jr. Their connection was immediate. He admired her intellect and discipline. She admired his vision and conviction. The couple married in 1953 and would eventually raise 4 children while becoming central figures in America's fight for equality. For years, Coretta lived with danger hovering over her family. Threatening phone calls, surveillance, bomb scares, and constant public hostility became part of daily life. Still, she stood beside her husband as marches, speeches, and protests transformed the nation. Then came April 4th, 1968. Dr. King was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, at just 39 years old. Coretta was only 41. The devastation was unimaginable. Yet within days, she returned to Memphis to lead a sanitation workers' march that Martin had planned before his death. That moment revealed the astonishing composure that would define the rest of her life. Rather than retreat into mourning, she expanded her husband's mission, establishing the King Center in Atlanta and campaigning tirelessly for racial justice, voting rights, and the eventual creation of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which officially became a federal holiday in 1983. Still, beneath the historic accomplishments remained the pain of losing the person who had shared her dreams, fears, and future. Friends often described moments when Coretta appeared emotionally exhausted, worn down by decades of carrying both personal grief and public responsibility. As her health declined in later years following a stroke and ovarian cancer diagnosis, she gradually stepped away from public appearances. Coretta Scott King died on January 30th, 2006, at the age of 78. Nearly 38 years had passed since Martin's assassination, yet she spent those decades ensuring his voice would never disappear from American history. Her life became a testament not only to resilience, but to enduring love, the kind that survives even after loss reshapes everything left behind. Lena Horne. Lena Horne was one of the most elegant and influential entertainers of the 20th century. A performer whose beauty, intelligence, and commanding voice transformed her into a Hollywood legend. Yet behind the glamour of sold-out nightclubs, acclaimed films, and dazzling performances stood a woman who quietly carried years of emotional loss after the death of the man she considered the anchor of her life. Born in Brooklyn in 1917, Lena entered show business as a teenager during the Harlem Renaissance. By the 1940s, she had become one of the first black women in Hollywood to receive significant studio attention, appearing in films such as Cabin in the Sky and Stormy Weather. But success came with painful limitations. Hollywood often refused to cast black actors in meaningful leading roles, and many of Lena's musical scenes were deliberately filmed so they could be removed for segregated Southern audiences. Despite those humiliations, she persevered, becoming a symbol of sophistication and quiet resistance during a deeply divided era. In 1947, Lena married Lenny Hayton, a white Jewish composer and conductor who had worked with some of the biggest names in entertainment. Their marriage faced enormous backlash at the time because interracial unions were still heavily stigmatized in America. Friends warned them their relationship could damage their careers. Some studios reportedly pressured Lena to keep her personal life out of public view. Nevertheless, the couple remained together for more than 2 decades, navigating prejudice, fame, and professional pressures side by side. Everything changed in 1971 when Lenny Hayton died of a heart attack at the age of 63. His death shattered Lena emotionally. Although she continued performing for years afterward, many close to her noticed a visible change in her spirit. The sharp wit and polished confidence remained on stage, but privately she became increasingly withdrawn. In later interviews, Lena admitted that grief altered her outlook on life in ways she could never fully explain. Even as she achieved renewed acclaim with her acclaimed one-woman Broadway show, Lena Horne, The Lady and Her Music in 1981, the loneliness lingered beneath the applause. She rarely spoke publicly in dramatic terms about sorrow, yet those around her understood how deeply Lenny's absence affected her final decades. Lena Horne died in May 2010 at the age of 92 in New York City. By then, nearly 40 years had passed since losing her husband, but the emotional imprint of that loss remained part of her story forever. Her legacy endures not only through music and cinema, but through the remarkable dignity with which she carried both love and heartbreak throughout an extraordinary life. James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones possessed one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment history, a voice that carried immense power, warmth, and authority across generations. Audiences around the world knew him as Darth Vader in Star Wars, Mufasa in The Lion King, and one of the greatest stage actors of his era. Yet beyond the commanding performances and legendary status was a deeply private man whose later years were marked by profound personal loss after the death of his beloved wife. Born in Mississippi in 1931, James endured a difficult childhood shaped by poverty and severe stuttering. For years, he barely spoke in class, struggling with confidence and isolation. It was poetry and theater that eventually helped him reclaim his voice. That transformation would become one of the most extraordinary journeys in American acting history. Over a career spanning more than 6 decades, Jones earned multiple Emmy Awards, a Tony Award, a Grammy, and an honorary Academy Award, establishing himself as one of the most respected performers in modern entertainment. Although he experienced an earlier marriage to actress Julianne Marie during the 1960s, lasting emotional stability arrived when he met Cecilia Hart. The two married in 1982 after working together in theater, and their relationship became a rare source of peace within the demanding world of acting. Friends often described Cecilia as the calming force in James's life, someone who understood both his discipline and his deeply reserved personality. Together they raised a son while maintaining a quieter existence away from Hollywood spectacle. Then came devastating news in October 2016. Cecilia Hart died from ovarian cancer at the age of 68. Her passing profoundly affected James Earl Jones. Though he continued making occasional appearances and voice performances afterward, people close to him observed a growing solitude. Interviews became increasingly rare, and he spent much of his time away from public attention at his home in New York. Unlike many celebrities who publicly discuss grief, James carried his sorrow quietly. There were no dramatic confessions or sensational headlines. Instead, his heartbreak appeared through absence, fewer performances, reduced travel, and a noticeable retreat from the spotlight that had defined much of his adult life. In September 2024, James Earl Jones died at the age of 93. By then, he had spent nearly 8 years without Cecilia, the woman many believed brought balance and warmth to his extraordinary life. His death marked the end of one of the most remarkable careers in entertainment history, but also closed the final chapter of a deeply human story. A man celebrated by millions who, beneath the legendary voice, spent his final years carrying the silence left behind after losing the person he loved most. Diahann Carroll. Diahann Carroll was a trailblazer whose elegance and determination helped redefine the image of Black women in American entertainment. With her poised presence, unmistakable voice, and groundbreaking television success, she became one of the first African-American actresses to achieve leading lady status in Hollywood. Yet behind the sophistication and historic accomplishments was a woman who endured devastating personal heartbreak after losing the man she once believed she would grow old beside. Born in the Bronx in 1935, Diahann Carroll displayed remarkable talent from a young age. Her rise began in the world of music and nightclub performances before she transitioned into film and television. In 1968, she made history starring in Julia, becoming the first black woman to lead a network television drama series in a non-servant role. At a time when opportunities for black actresses remained painfully limited, Carroll broke barriers with grace and intelligence, opening doors for future generations in Hollywood. During the 1970s, amid career success and constant public attention, Diahann found companionship with Robert DeLeon, a charismatic music producer and boutique owner who brought stability into her demanding life. The couple married in 1975, and those close to them described the relationship as deeply affectionate. Unlike many of the high-profile romances surrounding celebrities of that era, their marriage appeared grounded in genuine emotional support rather than public spectacle. Then tragedy struck without warning. On March 31, 1977, Robert DeLeon was killed in a car accident in Los Angeles at only 48 years old. Reports stated that his vehicle lost control on a wet freeway before crashing into a truck. The suddenness of his death devastated Diahann Carroll. Friends later recalled how difficult it became for her to discuss the loss publicly because the grief remained so raw for years afterward. Although she continued acting and eventually achieved renewed acclaim in productions such as Dynasty, the emotional impact of Robert's death never entirely disappeared. Carroll later admitted in interviews that balancing fame with personal happiness had often been painful, and losing Robert forced her to confront loneliness in ways she had never anticipated. The glamour surrounding her career frequently masked the emotional exhaustion she quietly carried. In the decades that followed, Diahann battled breast cancer twice, surviving the illness and becoming an advocate for awareness and early detection. Even through health struggles and public scrutiny, she maintained extraordinary composure and professionalism, refusing to allow hardship to define her legacy. Diahann Carroll died on October 4, 2019, at the age of 84, after complications related to cancer. More than 40 years had passed since Robert DeLeon's death, yet many who knew her believed a part of her heart never fully recovered from that sudden loss. Her story remains one of groundbreaking achievement shadowed by personal sorrow. A woman who conquered barriers on screen while privately carrying the memory of love interrupted far too soon. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. lived one of the most extraordinary and turbulent lives in entertainment history. Singer, dancer, comedian, actor, impressionist. There seemed to be nothing he could not do on stage. As a member of the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, Sammy became a global symbol of talent and charisma. Yet behind the flashing lights of Las Vegas and the roaring applause stood a man battling deep loneliness, personal pressure, and overwhelming grief after losing the woman who remained by his side through the most chaotic years of his life. Born in Harlem in 1925, Sammy entered show business as a child and spent nearly his entire life performing. His brilliance earned admiration worldwide, but success came at a steep cost. During the height of segregation in America, he often faced racism, even while entertaining elite audiences. Hotels welcomed him on stage, but refused him entry through the front door. Despite becoming one of the most famous performers in the country, Sammy frequently described feeling isolated in both Hollywood and society itself. In 1970, he married Altavice Davis, a talented dancer and actress who understood the exhausting realities of life in entertainment. Their relationship endured financial stress, relentless touring schedules, media scrutiny, and Sammy's long-standing struggles with addiction and gambling. Even so, Altavice remained one of the few constants in his unpredictable world. Friends close to the couple often said she brought emotional balance to a man constantly surrounded by pressure and temptation. Then, in March 1990, tragedy struck. Altavice Davis died from complications related to a stroke at the age of 65. Her death deeply affected Sammy, whose own health was already rapidly deteriorating due to throat cancer caused by years of smoking. Doctors offered him a life-saving surgery that would remove his larynx, but Sammy refused because he believed losing his voice would destroy the essence of who he was as a performer. The emotional blow of Altavise's death seemed to intensify the sadness already consuming him. Those who visited Sammy during his final months described a man exhausted physically and emotionally, increasingly reflective about mortality, regret, and the cost of fame. Though surrounded by wealth and legendary status, he often appeared profoundly alone. On May 16, 1990, just over 2 months after Altavise passed away, Sammy Davis Jr. died at his Beverly Hills home at the age of 64. His death marked the end of a dazzling yet deeply complicated life story. Beneath the tuxedos, standing ovations, and endless applause was a man who spent decades entertaining millions while quietly searching for peace, companionship, and stability in a world that rarely allowed him to fully rest. Nina Simone. Nina Simone was not simply a performer. She was a force of nature. With a voice capable of shifting from velvet softness to raw fury within a single verse, she became one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. Songs like "Feelin' Good," "I Put a Spell on You," and "Mississippi Goddamn" transformed her into both a musical icon and a fearless voice during the civil rights movement. But behind the brilliance of her piano compositions and emotionally charged performances stood a woman whose personal life was marked by pain, isolation, and lingering sorrow after the collapse of her marriage. Born Eunice Kathleen Wayman in North Carolina in 1933, Nina displayed extraordinary musical talent as a child and dreamed of becoming the first Black classical concert pianist in America. However, racial barriers repeatedly obstructed her ambitions. After being denied entry to the Curtis Institute of Music, a rejection many believed was influenced by discrimination, she turned toward nightclub performances to survive financially. That decision changed music history forever, but it also marked the beginning of a life filled with emotional turbulence. In the early 1960s, Nina married Andrew Stroud, often known as Andy Stroud. He became both her husband and manager, overseeing much of her rapidly expanding career. At first, the relationship appeared stable and professionally beneficial. Andy helped organize tours and contracts, while Nina's fame exploded internationally. Yet behind closed doors, the marriage deteriorated under intense pressure, financial disputes, and emotional volatility. Years later, Nina openly described the relationship as deeply painful, alleging physical abuse and controlling behavior during parts of their marriage. The emotional damage left lasting scars long after their divorce in 1970. Even after separating from Andy, Nina struggled with trust, loneliness, and periods of severe depression that increasingly affected her personal and professional life. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, she drifted between countries including Liberia, Switzerland, France, and the Netherlands, often living in near isolation. Though her performances remained mesmerizing, many friends noticed her growing emotional exhaustion. In later years, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a condition that helped explain the unpredictable mood swings and emotional intensity that had shaped much of her life. Andrew Stroud died in 1993, years after their separation. By then, Nina's life had already become haunted by reflection, regret, and deteriorating health. She continued performing sporadically but increasingly withdrew from public life while living in southern France. On April 21, 2003, Nina Simone died at the age of 70 after battling breast cancer. Her passing closed the chapter on one of music's most complicated and unforgettable figures. Though celebrated worldwide for her artistry and activism, Nina's story also revealed the painful emotional cost carried behind the spotlight. A woman whose genius captivated millions while her private struggles quietly consumed her for decades. Redd Foxx. Redd Foxx built a career making audiences laugh harder than almost anyone of his era. But away from the stage, his life was often overshadowed by financial chaos, strained relationships, and deep personal loneliness. Famous for his razor-sharp humor and groundbreaking television success, Foxx became one of comedy's most influential pioneers. Yet beneath the bold confidence and outrageous punchlines stood a man whose later years were marked by emotional hardship, following the loss of someone who had once shared his most difficult battles. Born John Elroy Sanford in St. Louis in 1922, Redd Foxx rose from poverty through years of nightclub performances on the Chitlin circuit before achieving mainstream fame. During the 1950s and 1960s, his adult comedy records became enormously popular, earning him the nickname King of the Party Records. But his greatest breakthrough arrived in 1972 with the television sitcom Sanford and Son, where his portrayal of junk dealer Fred Sanford transformed him into a household name across America. Despite his professional success, Foxx's personal life remained unstable. Multiple marriages, mounting debts, and clashes with business managers frequently placed him under enormous stress. One of the most significant relationships in his life was with Evelyn Killebrew, whom he married in 1976. Friends described Evelyn as calm, supportive, and far removed from the chaotic energy surrounding Hollywood celebrity culture. Their relationship endured years of emotional strain caused by financial troubles and Redd's demanding career, eventually ending in divorce during the late 1980s. Although separated, Evelyn remained an important emotional figure in Foxx's life. Her death in 1991 reportedly affected him deeply at a time when his own circumstances had already become increasingly difficult. The IRS had seized many of his possessions due to unpaid taxes, and his financial situation had become a source of embarrassment and pressure. Publicly, Redd continued performing and working in television, but privately, he appeared exhausted by years of instability. On October 11, 1991, while rehearsing on the set of the sitcom The Royal Family, Redd Foxx suffered a massive heart attack. At first, co-workers believed he was joking because heart attack routines had long been part of his comedic act. Moments later, the room realized the situation was real. He died later that day at the age of 68. Redd Foxx left behind an extraordinary legacy that helped shape modern stand-up comedy and opened doors for future black comedians. Yet his story also revealed the painful contrast between public laughter and private suffering. For all the joy he brought audiences, the final chapter of his life was marked not by applause, but by loneliness, emotional weariness, and the lingering ache of relationships that time could never fully repair. Eartha Kitt. Eartha Kitt possessed a presence so magnetic that audiences often struggled to look away from her. With her unmistakable voice, feline elegance, and fearless personality, she became one of the most distinctive entertainers of the 20th century. Whether performing songs like Santa Baby or captivating viewers as Catwoman in the 1960s Batman television series, Eartha projected confidence and glamour. Yet beneath the sophistication and sharp wit was a woman shaped by abandonment, heartbreak, and lingering emotional wounds that followed her long after the collapse of her marriage. Born in South Carolina in 1927 under extremely difficult circumstances, Eartha endured poverty and instability during childhood before eventually joining the Katherine Dunham dance troupe as a teenager. International tours introduced her to European audiences, where her exotic stage persona and remarkable talent quickly attracted attention. By the 1950s, she had become a global sensation, admired for her singing, acting, and ability to command a room with almost hypnotic intensity. In 1960, Eartha married John William McDonald, a real estate investor who appeared to offer the emotional security she had long searched for. Together, they had a daughter, Kit McDonald. And for a brief period, Eartha seemed genuinely hopeful about balancing family life with her demanding career. But maintaining that balance proved difficult. Constant travel, professional pressure, and personal disagreements gradually eroded the relationship. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1964, leaving Eartha emotionally devastated, despite her efforts to maintain composure publicly. Friends later described how deeply the separation affected her trust in relationships. Although she continued captivating audiences worldwide and rebuilding her career after political controversy temporarily damaged her standing in the United States during the late 1960s, her personal life became increasingly guarded and private. Years later, when John William MacDonald died in 2005, Eartha reportedly reflected often on the complicated emotions surrounding their relationship. Unlike sensationalized stories invented by tabloids, there is no verified evidence of dramatic final confrontations or haunting deathbed confessions. What remains clear, however, is that the marriage represented one of the few moments in Eartha's life when she allowed herself emotional vulnerability beyond the stage persona that had made her famous. Even into her 70s and 80s, Eartha continued touring and performing with remarkable energy. Audiences admired her resilience, unaware of how much loneliness and disappointment she had quietly endured across decades in the spotlight. On December 25, 2008, Eartha Kitt died from colon cancer at the age of 81. Her death marked the end of a singular career built on survival, reinvention, and extraordinary charisma. Yet behind the dazzling gowns and seductive performances was a woman who spent much of her life searching for lasting emotional peace, something fame and applause alone could never fully provide. Ray Charles. Ray Charles changed the sound of modern music forever. Blending gospel, blues, jazz, rhythm and blues, and country into an entirely new style, he became one of the most influential musicians in American history. His voice carried pain, passion, joy, and spiritual intensity in equal measure, helping create timeless classics such as Georgia on My Mind, Hit the Road, Jack, and Unchain My Heart. But behind the legendary recordings and sold-out performances stood a man whose personal life was filled with emotional conflict, broken relationships, and lingering sorrow that followed him into his final years. Born in Georgia in 1930 and raised in poverty in Florida, Ray lost his eyesight at the age of 7 due to glaucoma. The tragedy forced him to develop extraordinary independence from childhood, relying almost entirely on sound and instinct to navigate the world around him. Music became both refuge and identity. By the 1950s, his innovative style revolutionized American popular music and earned him worldwide fame. Despite his artistic brilliance, Ray's private life was complicated. He married Della Beatrice Howard Robinson in 1955, and together they built a family while his career expanded at an astonishing pace. Della, often called B, supported Ray during the most demanding years of touring and recording, helping maintain stability while his celebrity status intensified. Yet fame also brought destructive habits. Ray struggled for years with heroin addiction, infidelity, and the exhausting pressures of constant travel. As his success grew, the emotional distance within the marriage widened. Della later spoke publicly about the pain caused by Ray's affairs and unpredictable lifestyle. After more than 2 decades together, the marriage collapsed in 1977. Although they separated legally, people close to Ray believed he carried deep regret about the damage addiction and fame had inflicted on his family relationships. In the years that followed, Ray eventually overcame heroin addiction and rebuilt parts of his personal life. But loneliness increasingly appeared beneath the confident public image. While his musical achievements continued accumulating, including 17 Grammy Awards and induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986, age and declining health slowly weakened him physically. During the early 2000s, Ray battled severe liver disease while continuing to record and perform whenever possible. Those final years became more reflective, with Ray speaking openly about hardship, mistakes, and the emotional cost of fame. On June 10, 2004, Ray Charles died at the age of 73 at his home in Beverly Hills, California. His death marked the loss of one of music's greatest innovators, a man whose artistry transcended generations and genres. Yet beyond the legendary voice and extraordinary genius remained a deeply human story. Someone who spent a lifetime creating beauty for the world while quietly wrestling with regret, fractured relationships, and the enduring ache left behind by love that could never fully be repaired. Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou lived many lives within one extraordinary journey. She was a poet, memoirist, actress, civil rights activist, professor, and one of the most powerful literary voices in modern American history. Her words inspired millions because they were born from survival, resilience, and emotional truth. Yet beneath the global admiration and intellectual brilliance was a woman who experienced profound loneliness and heartbreak after the collapse and loss of important relationships that shaped her deeply personal understanding of love. Born Marguerite Annie Johnson in St. Louis in 1928, Maya endured severe trauma during childhood, including racism, violence, and years of emotional silence after abuse left her nearly mute as a young girl. Literature eventually became her refuge. Through poetry and storytelling, she transformed suffering into art that resonated across generations. Her groundbreaking 1969 memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, changed American literature forever, offering an unflinching account of Black womanhood, trauma, identity, and perseverance. Although Maya Angelou became widely admired for her wisdom about relationships and human connection, her personal romantic life was often turbulent. She married Greek sailor Tosh Angelos in the 1950s, from whom she adopted the surname Angelou. Their marriage eventually ended, but the emotional lessons drawn from love, disappointment, and separation deeply influenced her writing throughout the decades that followed. Later in life, Maya formed meaningful relationships with influential figures, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, both of whom were assassinated during periods when she worked alongside them in the civil rights movement. Those devastating losses profoundly affected her worldview, reinforcing themes of grief, endurance, and emotional survival that appeared repeatedly in her poetry and autobiographical works. Though Maya rarely sensationalized her personal sorrow publicly, close friends often described periods when she wrestled quietly with loneliness, despite worldwide admiration. Fame brought recognition, but it did not erase the emotional scars accumulated through years of loss, heartbreak, and witnessing tragedy within both her personal and professional circles. Even into her 80s, Maya continued writing, lecturing, and mentoring younger generations with remarkable energy. Her voice carried authority because it came from lived experience rather than performance. Audiences trusted her honesty precisely because she never pretended life was free from pain. On May 28, 2014, Maya Angelou died at the age of 86 at her home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Her passing marked the loss of one of America's most influential cultural figures. Yet beyond the awards, best-selling books, and historic achievements remained a deeply human story. A woman who transformed grief into wisdom and spent her life teaching others that even after heartbreak, dignity and strength could still endure. B.B. King. B.B. King carried the sound of heartbreak in every note he played. Known worldwide as the King of the Blues, he transformed personal sorrow into music that touched generations across every corner of the globe. With his beloved guitar Lucille in hand and a voice filled with aching emotion, B.B. King created timeless classics like The Thrill Is Gone, becoming one of the most influential musicians in American history. Yet behind the legendary performances and international fame stood a man whose personal life was often marked by emotional distance, fractured relationships, and the quiet loneliness that followed him into old age. Born Riley B. King in Mississippi in 1925 during the height of racial segregation, He grew up surrounded by poverty, cotton fields, and hardship. Music became both escape and survival. Influenced by gospel and Delta blues traditions, King gradually developed a guitar style so expressive that it redefined blues music itself. By the 1950s and 1960s, he was performing hundreds of concerts each year, building a reputation as one of the hardest-working entertainers in the industry. Amid the endless touring schedule, BB experienced repeated difficulty maintaining stable relationships. He married Martha Lee Denton in 1946, though the marriage ended quickly. Later, he married Sue Carol Hall in 1958. That relationship lasted far longer, but eventually collapsed under the strain of constant travel, exhaustion, and the emotional distance created by a life spent almost entirely on the road. King himself later admitted that music consumed so much of his existence that sustaining family life became incredibly difficult. Although divorced, BB often spoke with reflection and regret about the sacrifices his career demanded. Behind the smiling stage persona was someone who spent decades moving from city to city, hotel to hotel, rarely remaining in one place long enough to build lasting emotional stability. Friends close to him described how the blues he performed so powerfully often mirrored real loneliness within his private life. As he aged, diabetes and declining health increasingly limited his ability to perform. Yet even in his late 70s and 80s, King continued touring because the stage remained the place where he felt most alive and connected to others. Music became companionship during years when many personal relationships had faded or fractured. On May 14, 2015, B.B. King died at the age of 89 in Las Vegas, Nevada. His death closed the chapter on one of the greatest musical careers ever recorded. But beyond the awards, sold-out arenas, and legendary guitar solos was a deeply emotional story. A man who gave the world songs about heartbreak while privately understanding that pain more intimately than most people ever realized. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin did not earn the title Queen of Soul by accident. Her voice carried extraordinary emotional force, capable of sounding triumphant, vulnerable, spiritual, and heartbroken, all within the same performance. With timeless hits like Respect, Natural Woman, and Think, she became one of the most influential singers in music history and a defining voice of American culture. Yet behind the power and confidence that electrified audiences stood a woman whose private life was often filled with emotional turmoil, difficult relationships, and lingering loneliness that followed her long after love faded away. Born in Memphis in 1942 and raised in Detroit, Aretha grew up surrounded by gospel music inside the church led by her father, the influential preacher C.L. Franklin. Her talent emerged astonishingly early. By her teenage years, she was already recognized as a vocal phenomenon. During the 1960s and 1970s, her recordings transformed soul music forever, earning worldwide acclaim and eventually 18 Grammy Awards. But while her professional success soared, her personal life became increasingly complicated. In 1961, Aretha married Ted White, who also became her manager during the explosive rise of her career. At first, the relationship appeared stable, but over time it deteriorated amid reports of controlling behavior, emotional strain, and frequent conflict. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1969, leaving Aretha emotionally exhausted during the very years when her fame was reaching historic levels. Years later, she married actor Glynn Turman in 1978. The union initially offered renewed hope for companionship and stability, yet balancing demanding careers and family responsibilities proved difficult. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1984, adding another painful chapter to Aretha's search for lasting emotional peace. Despite becoming one of the most celebrated performers in history, Aretha often appeared deeply private and guarded outside public appearances. Friends and collaborators described someone who trusted very few people completely. The enormous pressure of fame, combined with decades of emotional disappointment, gradually contributed to periods of isolation during her later years. Health struggles increasingly affected her after 2010 as she battled serious illness while continuing to perform occasionally. Even as her physical condition weakened, audiences remained captivated whenever she stepped onto a stage because her voice still carried extraordinary emotional depth. On August 16, 2018, Aretha Franklin died from pancreatic cancer at the age of 76 in Detroit, Michigan. Her passing marked the loss of one of the greatest singers ever recorded. Yet beyond the unmatched vocals and historic success remained a profoundly human story. A woman who spent her life giving voice to love, heartbreak, dignity, and longing while privately carrying emotional wounds that fame could never completely heal. Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole inherited one of the most famous names in music history, but she spent much of her life fighting to prove she was far more than simply the daughter of legendary singer Nat King Cole. Gifted with remarkable vocal talent, sophistication, and emotional range, Natalie eventually built an extraordinary career of her own, winning multiple Grammy Awards and captivating audiences across several decades. Yet, beneath the glamour and success was a woman who endured addiction, personal loss, failed relationships, and profound loneliness that shaped the emotional core of her later years. Born in Los Angeles in 1950, Natalie grew up surrounded by music and celebrity culture. But tragedy arrived early when her father, Nat King Cole, died from lung cancer in 1965 at only 45 years old. Natalie was just 15. The loss deeply affected her emotional development and would remain one of the defining heartbreaks of her life. In later interviews, she admitted struggling for years with feelings of abandonment and pressure connected to carrying the Cole family legacy. By the mid-1970s, Natalie had become a major star in her own right, with energetic R&B hits such as This Will Be and Inseparable. However, the pressures of fame soon collided with severe addiction problems involving heroin and cocaine. During the darkest years of her dependency, personal relationships became increasingly unstable. Although she experienced multiple marriages, including to producer Andre Fisher and later Bishop Kenneth Dupree, lasting emotional stability often remained elusive. Even after successfully overcoming addiction and rebuilding her career during the late 1980s, emotional scars continued following her through adulthood. Her enormously successful 1991 album Unforgettable with Love, a virtual duet project honoring her late father, revealed how deeply his absence still shaped her life decades after his death. The album sold more than 7 million copies in the United States and won several Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. Yet behind the triumph remained the lingering ache of unfinished connection between daughter and father. As Natalie aged, serious health complications emerged. Years of substance abuse contributed to hepatitis C and eventually kidney disease, forcing her to undergo frequent medical treatments while continuing to perform whenever possible. On December 31, 2015, Natalie Cole died from heart failure complicated by pulmonary arterial hypertension at the age of 65. Her passing closed the story of a singer whose life reflected both extraordinary resilience and deep emotional vulnerability. Beneath the polished performances and celebrated career was a woman who spent decades searching for healing from losses that fame, applause, and success could never completely erase. Tina Turner. Tina Turner survived a life that would have broken many others long before reaching the heights of global superstardom. Fierce, electrifying, and unforgettable on stage, she became one of the greatest live performers in music history, earning the title Queen of Rock and Roll through decades of relentless energy and resilience. Songs like What's Love Got to Do with It, The Best, and Private Dancer transformed her into an international icon. But behind the blazing spotlight and thunderous stadium applause stood a woman who endured profound trauma, devastating personal losses, and emotional loneliness that followed her even after reclaiming her freedom. Born Anna Mae Bullock in Tennessee in 1939, Tina's childhood was marked by instability and abandonment. Her parents separated when she was young, leaving emotional scars that would shape much of her adult life. Everything changed after she met musician Ike Turner in St. Louis during the late 1950s. Their musical chemistry was explosive. Together, Ike and Tina Turner became one of the most successful live acts in America, delivering performances filled with unmatched intensity and raw power. Yet behind the success existed a terrifying reality. For years, Tina endured severe physical and emotional abuse during her marriage to Ike Turner. In later interviews and her memoir, I, Tina, she described living in constant fear while trying to maintain the image of a glamorous entertainer before the public. By the mid-1970s, the violence and psychological control had become unbearable. In 1976, after a brutal altercation before a concert in Dallas, Tina fled the marriage with almost no money, beginning one of the most remarkable comeback stories in entertainment history. After divorcing Ike in 1978, Tina rebuilt her career almost entirely from scratch. During the 1980s, she achieved even greater success as a solo artist, becoming one of the world's biggest music stars at an age when many believed female performers were already past their commercial peak. Yet despite the triumph, emotional pain never fully disappeared. Tina often spoke honestly about trauma, trust, and the difficulty of finding peace after years of abuse. In later life, she finally discovered stability and companionship with German music executive Erwin Bach, whom she married in 2013 after nearly 3 decades together. Their relationship offered Tina the calm and security she had spent much of her life searching for. Even so, devastating family tragedies continued to affect her deeply, including the deaths of 2 sons, Craig Turner in 2018 and Ronnie Turner in 2022. Years of health struggles involving cancer, kidney disease, and complications from a stroke gradually weakened her during retirement in Switzerland. On May 24, 2023, Tina Turner died at the age of 83 at her home near Zurich. Her death marked the end of one of the most extraordinary lives in music history, not simply because of fame or success, but because she transformed unimaginable suffering into strength, inspiration, and artistic greatness that resonated across generations. Behind the awards, standing ovations, and worldwide fame, these legends were still human beings searching for love, peace, and understanding. Some spent decades grieving the loss of a soulmate. Others carried guilt over broken relationships they could never repair. Their stories remind us that fame cannot protect anyone from heartbreak, loneliness, or regret. But here's the question many people still debate today. Did Hollywood fame destroy these relationships? Or were these tragedies inevitable long before the spotlight arrived? Some believe success gave these stars everything, while others believe it quietly took away the people who mattered most. What do you think? Share your opinion in the comments below because your perspective may be featured in our next video. And if you enjoy uncovering the untold truths behind iconic celebrities, don't forget to subscribe to Black Celebrity Secrets for more powerful stories every week.